Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us today for a webinar. Before we get started, I just want to tell you, take a minute or so to tell you about the Center for Student Success, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Teresa Capra, who's going to introduce our presenter for today. So the Center for Student Success, as many of you know, is a statewide center that really focuses on increasing both successful experiences and then, of course, most importantly, successful outcomes for students at our community colleges across the state. We work with all of our 19 community colleges to try to improve their programming and initiatives for students, and we do that through a guided pathways framework. So we're helping colleges make sure they're developing really effective programs that are clear and easy for students to understand so they know what path they need to travel in order to get to their goal. And then we provide the guidance. So we're helping colleges guide students to get them on the right path and to keep them on the right path. One important element of the Guided Pathways framework is to make sure that we're creating meaningful learning experiences for our students. And that's what this webinar series is all about, helping you understand how you can better help your students be successful. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Capra, who's going to introduce our presenter for the day. Here we go.
Yep. Hello, everyone. I am Teresa Capra from Mercer County Community College, and I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker for today, Professor Fidel Wilson from Brookdale Community College. Professor Wilson is an associate professor of counseling at Brookdale, and last year Professor Wilson presented on his research at the Engaging Learners Conference, and I know it's a fantastic, timely, very important topic. Fidel Wilson is also deep in his dissertation writing, so he is living this research day to day. We can all remember that. So I am once again so thrilled to introduce Professor Wilson from Brookdale. Thank you.
Let's get your PowerPoint up.
Okay.
Alrighty. Where is it? It's behind it. Should I go down here? Okay. Okay.
Okay. Well, hopefully everyone can hear me out there. Thank you to Dr. Harrington for this opportunity, and Dr. Teresa for giving me this opportunity to present on some of what I've been doing for the past, I don't know how many years, in terms of research on working with African-American male students. I'm going to jump right into this. At some point, I may ask a question, and if you could use your chat feature to kind of respond to that question, I would greatly appreciate that. First, we're going to start off with the objectives of what we're going to talk about today. The first is the overview of the problem and reason for choosing this topic. Why Black males? Why faculty-student interaction? And most importantly, I think, why a community college? We're also going to address the issue of personal biases and stereotyping and how they may impact our interactions with students, as well as their interactions with us. We're going to discuss a paradigmatic shift in our approach to interaction. I'll talk a little bit about that and the difference in the way that we're going to look at our approach to interacting with students. We're going to introduce a theoretical framework, which I think works best with what we're trying to do. More importantly, the interventions that I think will be effective in increasing interaction. This theoretical framework sort of guides what we need to do in terms of how we approach our interventions. We're going to address some of the literature on faculty-student interaction from the perspective of Black male students. We'll highlight some strategies that faculty can use in the classroom to enhance their interaction with Black males. And then lastly, and this may be happening all the while I'm doing this presentation, and that is some dialogue about our experiences in interacting with Black males in the classroom. All right, so the first question is, why Black males? When comparing women to men, and this is not just the case with Black students, this is the case with, I think, all racial groups, and that is that women sort of outpace the men in terms of things like graduation rates and college enrollment. So this is no different for our Black students on campus, where the females outpace the males. In terms of the associate degrees, specifically when looking at national data, when we look at the academic year of 2012-2013, only 33% of those degrees were conferred to males, compared to 67% that was awarded to females. So there's this large gap in terms of degree attainment between the males and females. And that's building into the reason as to why I felt the need to sort of focus in on what's going on with the Black males, that their rate of success is not as high as that of their female counterparts. Black males also, in a large study done by Kouget, you see here in 1997, he did a study on student success in African-American males. And what he found is that Black males are more likely to be disconnected from activities that are positively linked to student success. So we're talking about things like student involvement on campus, holding leadership positions on campus, and even things as necessary as time studying. The female students reported more so than the African-American males. So there are these activities that we know from research that are positively linked to student success. And what we find is that Black males are not taking advantage of those things as much as their female counterparts. So why the community college context? Well, in part, I work for a community college, so there's a personal investment there. But beyond that, majority of the research on Black males and student success, if you look at it, it occurs within the four-year context. There's not much literature compared to the literature that is out in terms of four-year students and Black males and student success within the 2-year. And the interesting thing about that is the characteristics, the student characteristics are significantly different in some aspects from the 2-year students and the 4-year students. When you look at things like the amount of hours that students report working, it is significantly different at a 2-year as opposed to at a 4-year. We know from research that community college students are more likely to come from low-income backgrounds. They are less likely to interact with faculty. They're more likely to need things like remedial courses. They're less likely to get involved in activities on campus. And then according to Engel and Tinto, they're 7 times more likely to graduate with a bachelor's degree if they begin their college journey at a 4-year institution. Now, the problem with that is what we see on the next line here, and that is that 54% of all Black men that enroll in college begin at a 2-year institution. So if the ultimate goal is to get a bachelor's degree and beyond, students from the research are more likely, particularly Black male students, are more likely to obtain that degree if they go straight to a 4-year. The problem with that is majority of our Black men that begin their college journey start at a 2-year. So we have a major issue with success if students are not getting what they need at the 2-year level, particularly if that's where their primary pathway to higher education begins. All right, so next I'm going to show you some pictures. And these are pictures of what I believe to be young Black males, students. So I want you to not respond to anything. I just want you to simply look at the picture. And as you look at the picture, I want you as a faculty member, as an administrator, to tell me what is it that you see. So I'm going to go through these pictures slowly, but I want you to take a look at the students that you see in the picture. Now, I want you to think about when you saw the picture of the student, what thought came to your mind? So I'm going to be a little transparent here and give you what I thought my observations were when I saw the pictures initially. The first is I looked at male individuals that present to me as males, and they presented as Black males. I don't know that this is the case, but that's how they presented to me when I took a look at the pictures. The second thing that occurred to me was that a smile makes a big difference in how I perceive them. So let me go back to the first student who is smiling, the second student who is not smiling, the third student is not smiling, the fourth student looks like he could be on the verge of a smile. And then lastly, we have a student that is smiling. And when I look at those pictures, whether a student was smiling or not made a big difference in how I perceive them. And I wonder if I could take a poll right now, I wonder if that's the same perspective that you had. So if you could use your chat feature, I think I'll be able to see it.
They have to write an answer. So what's the question you want them to?
So here's the answer I want you to write, and it's simply yes or no. And that is, when you saw the pictures, my observation or my assumption or my thought is a smile made a difference in how you perceive them. So we have some that say yes, we have some that say no, a smile. So again, this is my personal sort of reaction to the pictures when I saw them, that a smile made a difference, and we have some that said no. Okay, the red one. All right, so just to go back, in the meantime, I want you to think about what assumptions do you make, and how do those assumptions impact your interactions? What we know is that everyone makes some sort of assessment of a person when you first meet them. We don't always act on what we see, but we initially, without making the decision to, we make some sort of assumption about that individual. So here's some findings that come from Frankel and Swanson in terms of asking faculty about their level of satisfaction when they interacted with students. And what this study has shown, that the more a student was perceived to be uninterested and self-absorbed, the more likely the interaction was recalled by faculty as dissatisfying, and the more likely the instructor reports being more authoritative toward the student. So I want you to listen to the impact here. So for the faculty members that participated in this study, when they presumed or perceived that the student was disinterested or not interested and self-absorbed, they recalled the interaction as not satisfying, and not only that, they took a more authoritative approach toward the student. So the way that they perceived the student impacted the way that they acted toward the student. So that's powerful, because if a student is being seen as not interested or self-absorbed, it is possible that that could impact the way in which you actually teach that student in the classroom. The second point is, conversely, when the student was perceived to be interested in the instructor's viewpoint, the instructor was more likely to recall the interaction as satisfactory and give more praise and better clarification of course requirements. So students that were seen as not interested did not get the same kind of clarification on assignments and requirements as those students that seem interested. So here it is, our assumptions, our perceptions are impacting the way in which we are teaching students in the classroom. So what is faculty-student interaction all about? So when I look at the literature, sometimes I've seen that there is no line drawn between interaction and engagement, when in fact that they are two distinct concepts in the literature. So interaction, if I could plainly define it, is the extent to which faculty and students communicate about academic performance, personal goals, career plans, course content, and assignments. This is a type of communication that can happen in the classroom and outside of the classroom. Engagement is more specific. In terms of engagement, is the time and effort students put into what is known in the literature as educationally purposeful activities. These are activities, these are not limited to, but these are activities including collaborating with peers on a class project, studying, completing reading assignments for class, and interacting with faculty. So interaction can be something that leads to engagement, but the two are not the same. So when I talk about interaction, I want you to understand clearly what I'm speaking about, and not to be confused with engagement. But there is a lot of research out there that shows that as interaction increases, so does engagement. The benefits of faculty-student interaction. Interaction has been found to be positively linked to a lot of student outcomes. I'm just listing a few here, and some of those are GPA, persistence, learning, academic self-concept, and engagement. So there are a lot of benefits that stem from faculty-student interaction as an area to impact positively student success outcomes. So stereotypes and how they impact faculty-student interaction. First thing I want to talk about is a concept in the literature known as stereotype threat. Stereotype threat is fear of confirming as a self-characteristic a negative stereotype about one's own group. So I want you to think about how particularly Black males are portrayed in the media. And the last time you watched some news outlet or you read some article, what is it that you hear and what is it that you see? What is the picture that is painted in regards to African-American males? So I want you to think about that in terms of the concept stereotype threat, that it's a fear of confirming as a self-characteristic, a negative stereotype about one's own group. It has also been hypothesized by Steele and Aronson that this fear can impair one's academic performance by distraction, narrowed attention, anxiety, self-consciousness, and withdrawal of effort. So in terms of stereotype threat, Steele and Aronson did some extensive research in this area in terms of they have found in studies that in the event that stereotype threat is at work, it can actually impair one's academic performance, where one is not performing to their academic best because of anxiety or a self-consciousness that ultimately results in a withdrawal of effort. Wood found that Black males were apprehensive about engaging faculty because of fear of being perceived as unintelligent. So I want you to think about the pressure a Black male student may have in terms of if the student sees themselves or those that are a part of their group in terms of being a Black male being portrayed in a negative light. And then they step foot into your class on campus and they have a fear about being perceived as unintelligent. How could that impact their engagement in the classroom? How could that impact their desire to ask a question? If this is in fact the case, that they feel this pressure of being looked at as one that is not as intelligent as others. I want you to think about this as an example. If a student is being feeling the pressure of not wanting to confirm a stereotype of being unintelligent, think about this. If I can't get the answer wrong if I don't participate. And what you may find in some of your classes where students don't participate as much as you like is that students may have a fear that if I answer this question and I get it wrong, is it possible that they're going to look at me as one representing an entire race and that we are confirming the stereotype of African-American males not being intelligent? So this can translate into a student being perceived as not engaged or not interested. And I want you to think back to the study with Frankel and Swanson that we just talked about. If a student comes across, according to the faculty that were in the study, as not interested, they were treated maybe consciously, maybe not consciously, differently or looked at differently in terms of this was seen as a student that is not interested in the class, when in fact it could be a fear of confirming this stereotype of being unintelligent. So here are some practices that I believe faculty should avoid. And one of those practices is the approach me first sort of perspective or approach, whereas a student has to prove their interest in the course by asking questions. I mean, if I were to refer back to the previous study, you can see how this could be a challenge for those students that may be dealing with what we know to be stereotype threat. And the assumption could be made by a student's lack of asking questions that they're not interested in the course. But that's when the onus is on the student. When the onus is on the student to demonstrate that they are interested. And if they fail to do so, then that student may, sort of deliver a message that they unintend to deliver, and that message may be that they're not interested in the course. So I just want us as faculty to sort of keep this in mind, that if a student is not participating in class, there could be other factors there that may contribute to the student not participating in class. Now, I want to ask another question that I want you to respond to. And it revolves around, what is your experience on your campus in your classroom with your Black males? You may experience that there's a lot of participation, a lot of question asking, or you may experience that they're not asking a lot of questions. Out of my curiosity, I'm curious to know, what's your experience on your campus? Do you get a lot of questions being asked by the Black males, just out of your own experience? This is not fact or anything like that. This is just your personal experience. What is your experience on your campus? Do you have a lot of students, particularly your Black male students, that are asking questions, or do you see that they're a little more reserved and less likely to ask questions than other folks? So you can respond using your chat feature. I'd love to see sort of what your experiences are on your campuses. Another, okay, well, I'll give you a minute, a second to respond.
Yeah, it takes a minute.
Okay. Okay, so one from Danielle, it says no more or less than any other student. And we have one from Gina that says limited questions and services for students with disabilities. Student is more hesitant to question and come forth. Okay, so I want some more folks to respond. Okay, we have another one from Sabrina here. It says it seems to be dependent on the makeup of the class. For example, they're not only the Black males, there seems to be greater participation.
If they're not the only Black
male. Oh, I read that wrong. For example,
if they're not the only Black
if they're not the only Black male, there seems to be greater participation. Okay. So that's an interesting perspective. If they're not the only Black male in the class, there seems to be greater participation. All right, we have another one here that says the African-American males do not participate in classroom discussion. And since I'm a woman, I think that should be rarely
yes.
say anything. Now that's an interesting perspective from Sharice. I want to say that in my looking at the literature in terms of African-American male students and just African-American students in general, it's sometimes believed by some folks that you have to be male to identify, or that you have to be of the same race to identify. And the literature sort of shows something different in terms of students are just looking for someone genuinely interested in helping them. And I believe that if a faculty member demonstrates a genuine interest in working with a student, it doesn't matter if you're female, it doesn't matter if you're not African-American, students really respond to someone that takes an active interest. Now that active interest can be defined a lot of ways, but we're going to talk a little bit more as we move forward about what an active interest actually looks like. So let me move along here, and I appreciate everyone that is responding. This is my first time doing a webinar chat. So if I'm not as fluid as I should be,
The red button.
excuse me. All right, let's see, here we go. Okay. All right, so you have students that may take the approach that what does this have to do with me? I believe the use of culturally relative pedagogy helps students to sort of personalize the material. If you want to see more interaction, could it be that the student doesn't see themselves within the context of what's being taught? I think it's wonderful to allow students to sort of bring who they are and where they're from into the classroom, which is why when we give assignments, I think it should be room for a student to sort of bring their experiences into that assignment, as opposed to very rigid assignments that force students to maybe think about certain things that they've never thought about. It's not a part of their everyday lived experience, and assignments should sort of be tailored to that. Alienation, somebody just responded that talked a little bit about this in terms of being the only Black person in the classroom. Students often want to avoid putting themselves on the spot. And I know some faculty members with the greatest intention to avoid there not being any participation in the classroom will put students on the spot. And we could, have different opinions about this perspective. But I want to caution you, particularly from the studies I've seen in terms of when students talked about their interaction with faculty. Not everybody likes being put on the spot. And that could be an excuse or a reason for a student to not want to participate further. Because if they are put on the spot and they're dealing with these other stressors in terms of, I don't want to appear unintelligent, this could be a major issue and cause a student to ultimately withdraw from the class altogether. So I would avoid putting students on the spot. What I will say as a suggestion, however, is I like to use time before class or time after class. If I see that a student seems to not be engaged in the classroom, to maybe ask the student when the crowd has sort of dissipated and talk to the student one-on-one about what I see and sort of my perspective of their participation or level of participation in the classroom. So that's just a suggestion. I know that alienation can go wrong sometimes when we want to, sort of prod students and get them to participate so bad that we may put a student on the spot, particularly if the student appears to be the only one of a particular gender or race in the classroom. It may not serve as a good way to sort of engage that student because they may feel like they're the only one, and that could lead to a student sort of disengaging in the classroom. And then the last one here is presume to fail, or no one cares if I pass or fail. I know from my own personal experience, I've been in classes when I was an undergraduate where faculty would use what I call a scare tactic. Look to your left, look to your right. Half of you won't be here by the end of the year, and those sort of things are, in my opinion, are used to let students know that the course is serious and that it's it's a rigorous course. But at the same time, some students come in with the attitude that they're not good enough, that they may not be able to perform at the level of their peers. So they may take the perspective that no one cares if I pass or fail. This is why it's good, in my opinion, to sort of engage a student one-on-one. I know not all faculty feel comfortable doing that, but I think that if you reach out to a student and you show genuine concern, that student will then respond to that concern. So that students feel like they are a part of the class, and that you care whether or not they pass or they fail. I think it's important to make sure that you at some point deliver some encouraging message to students. And this idea that to show that the class is rigorous and to make the statement that students, by the end of the class, that only half of you will be left, may not be something that students respond to. All right, I'm trying to.
Is it stuck?
Yeah.
Let's see. That where you want to go?
Yeah. All right. So we're back. All right. So
there's a question up here, though. It looks like
there's a question.
I see a question. Let's see. Nope. That's just a use that response before. Okay. Oops. Now I'm going crazy on you. You want to be back there? Oh, now it's not going to go back. Oops. Bear with us for a moment. Technical difficulties. Or we're on the wrong page, right?
Mm-hmm.
What the heck is going on? Okay, tell me when we're on the right page.
There.
Okay, we're back.
Sorry about that. All right, we're back. So in regards to what I said on the last slide, there's two perspectives. There's what is known as deficit-based and versus strength-based. I want you to consider this. Dr. Ivory Tolson said this at a symposium put on by ETS. And that is to increase Black male enrollment in college, inner city high schools may introduce a gang prevention program. When in reality, if we want to increase Black male college attendance, introducing more college prep programs and honors classes would be better at achieving that end. So sometimes with the greatest intention, institutions will sort of talk about the things that students need to stay away from instead of introducing those things that students need to cling to. You know, one of the things that's interesting that I found at my own institution is that we have an honors program where the students in the honors program are really encouraged to engage in a faculty student sort of interaction relationship. They're really encouraged, and they even have to, as a part of their being a part of the honors program, they have to participate in a project that includes and involves their faculty member. So there's like built into the honors program the need and the necessity for students to interact with their faculty. Whereas that same type of interaction, I think, would go a long way in benefiting those students that are not doing well. Those students, for instance, that may be struggling academically, I think the greatest solution is that they form an even greater and stronger relationship with their faculty. And so what we want to do, rather than sort of highlight and emphasize that which these students need to stay away from, we really need to talk about those things that the students need to gravitate toward. And in doing more of those things that they should gravitate toward would result in less of them doing those things that they should stay away from. And it's just a perspective. And here's a quote by me, actually. Rather than talking about the likelihood and consequences of failing, we should talk to them about the benefits and advantages of passing. I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning with the desire to fail. I believe that every student has the belief or the desire to pass. And if we sort of nurture that desire, rather than talk about the difficulty or the rigor of our course and how hard it is, students may vacate the course early because they're afraid that they're not good enough. But if we highlight things about the benefits of taking an honors course versus a course that's not an honors course. I have some students, I don't know about you, that have the grades to join the honors program, but because they think it may be too hard, never even attempt to join the honors program. And that's because they know more about the difficulty than they do about the benefits of participating in a program like that. So really the onus, and when I talked earlier about in the objectives about the paradigmatic shift, the onus should really shift from the student to the institution. I mean, this is the discussion really about whose responsibility is it? Is it the responsibility of the institution to engage these students, or is it the responsibility of the student to get engaged themselves? So Harrison and Palacios did a study, and in the study, they wanted to demonstrate faculty-student engagement as a function of campus ethos. conditions fostered by faculty members. In their study, they found that faculty-student interaction with Black male students was increased when faculty created conditions where students felt more welcome. So now this is a different approach, whereas some faculty may take the approach that if the student is interested in the course, they'll demonstrate that by participating more, asking questions, and we know that there may be barriers, particularly for African American male students, that may hinder them from doing so. Harrison and Palacios takes the approach that faculty can create conditions where students feel welcome. And as students feel welcome, the natural outgrowth of that would be that students would be more inclined to get involved in classroom discussions and in things related to the class. Faculty can do this by, one, conveying that they belong in the classroom at the institution. What is it that you do? What is it that you say in your classes? And this is a question I'd like to put out there, just so that we can share it with those folks that are also listening. What is it that you do in your classroom? Or is there something that you do in your classroom? Is there something that you say at the beginning of the class to set the tone that every student is welcome in the class? How do you convey to your students that this is where they belong at the institution? So I want you to think about that. I want you to respond if there's something that you do in your class that you think it may be unique, maybe a great way, or something that's interesting in terms of sharing it with your colleagues. How do you make students feel welcome in the class? And I think that that's a major component of how faculty can really increase their interaction, is setting the tone early, just as a faculty could set the tone early that this is a serious and rigorous class. It's a hard class. We can also set the tone in terms of this is a class where all forms of discussion, all questions will be welcomed, all perspectives will be welcomed. How do we get students to feel at ease in our classroom? The second one thing that faculty can do in the classroom is asking questions, responding to questions, inquiring about progress. Students could actually, I'd love to see students attend office hours more. I know that at a community college, this is where it's very distinct from a four-year institution. A lot of our students are working. A lot of our students have multiple responsibilities that compete with their time outside of class. A lot of students make time just to go to class, and right after class is over, they're going straight to work. So faculty within the classroom have to really take advantage of things like asking thought-provoking questions and encouraging responses, responding to questions in a way that students feel like what you said or what they said was validated, and then inquiring about progress in the classroom. And I just want to take a second. I don't know if students, if people have responded to the last.
I don't think they
it
didn't.
will show up?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you want to pause, you have to tell them to write in chat. Otherwise, they don't know. So if you want them to answer a question, just repeat it, and then here we go.
Okay.
Then it pops up. So you want to repeat the question in case anybody else?
Sure.
Okay.
In my online class, I use an intro assignment with 7 questions and provide an in-depth response to each student privately. Okay, I like that. So Rosalia, I hope I'm not pronouncing your name wrong, says that she responds to the students in depth. It's correct. Wonderful. I got it right. Privately, which I think is a wonderful thing to do, because students are able to get more of a response. Whereas when you're competing with time, you don't always have the time in the classroom to sort of respond to a student's statement the way that you may want to respond, and always having an opportunity to respond outside of that bound system, that bound time that you have, is a wonderful thing to do. I want some more folks to respond here. I hope I haven't lost you, but I want some more folks to respond here about what is it that you do. Now I'm going to continue on with the presentation, But as you respond, I'll make time to sort of read and listen to what some of the things that you do within your class. Thank you, Rosalia, for that response. Another thing faculty can do is encouraging interaction with students and engage students outside of the class. Attend events. Now, I'm going to tell you something that goes a long way, and that is remembering the name of a student in your class. You'd be amazed if you're walking on campus and you address a student by name. The shock some students would have, because somehow acknowledging them by name says that you recognize them, you acknowledge them as someone that's in their class. Using that time outside of class, in passing on campus, just to ask a student how they're doing, conveys a message of care. And when students feel like their faculty care, it's a way for them to feel more comfortable and welcomed in the classroom. So even that, what you do outside of the classroom, has impact on what you do inside of the classroom.
Is it doing that again for you? I don't know why it's doing that. There we go.
All right, so on to the theoretical framework. So validation theory is a theory that was coined by Rendon in 1994, and it suggests that there is a positive correlation to success when students experience a person inside or outside of the classroom that takes an active interest, there goes that concept again, an active interest in them and their college experience. All right, ways to operationalize validation theory in the classroom. Our faculty could initiate contact with the student and not the other way around. So this is a difference. Whereas some faculty may wait for a student to ask them a question, faculty could initiate discussions and conversations with students, whether it be inside the classroom or outside of the classroom. Some students are just shy. Some students are just introverted. Some students may be dealing with what we talked about earlier in terms of stereotype threat. Students that are approached by faculty, or where faculty initiate contact with the student, it sort of gives them the opportunity to respond in sort of a non-pressured environment where they're not worried about whether or not this question I ask, it says a raised hand. Hold on one second, I think we have a question.
Let's see if we can figure out how. No. Oh, wait, over here. Wanted to make a suggestion. Student.
Okay, Sharice, you can go right ahead and make the suggestion.
Tell her to chat it.
You can chat the suggestion. And again, I apologize if I'm not as fluid with this. I have my students. TED Talks, okay.
Everyone can't see it, so you have to read it to them.
Oh, I didn't know everyone can see. All right, so you can't all see the questions. All right, so Sharice says, I wanted to make a suggestion regarding student engagement. I have my students view TED Talks pertaining to topics that they can relate to. I think that's a wonderful idea. I love TED Talks, and I think that there's enough TED Talks that exist where someone could find something, a topic that they're interested in. So I think that's a great resource. It says to call student engagement on topics that are important to them. Absolutely. So if students are sort of like more of a visual and they like to see presentations done, TED Talk is a great way to get students to get more engaged. And sometimes students need to hear from more than just you. And ultimately, when they go and they see something on YouTube, or whether or not they see something on a TED Talk, it's just another way for a student to bring something that they feel is relevant or engaging, and they can take that topic and bring it back to the classroom. And I think as students get more and more to talk about in the classroom, they feel comfortable. And sometimes that could be something that could be used as a tool to bring up more discussion in the classroom. you have them either view it outside of class or inside of class. I think it'll be a wonderful idea to have students view TED Talks. Let's see here.
Yep. Yep. There you go.
Students, I'm moving along with the validation theory here. Students should receive messages affirming their ability to succeed. And we can do that a lot of different ways. I remember watching a video put out by CESI. I forget what CESI stands for.
Community, yeah, engagement. Yeah.
It's an
Survey.
Right, Community College Student Engagement Survey. Yes, that's what it is. Where they put out a video where a student talked about that every class, well, he had a particular class where the faculty member started out by saying every student in the class has an A. Every student has an A. And this student, because he hadn't had an A before, wanted to fight to keep that A. That faculty member gave away or provided a way for that student to work toward keeping something that they never had. So that student talked about how hard he fought to maintain that A. Always checked up with the professor to make sure he still had the A average. And it was just a great tool that I think that faculty member used that actually reached that student and caused that student to want to succeed and do better. Assignments should invite personal experiences of students, and this enables students to provide insight based upon their lived experiences and bring that into the classroom. All right, you won't let me do that.
I don't know why it keeps doing that.
All right, so why faculty play a critical role in validating students? Most four-year students use, most four-year institutions, and I want you to think about this, most four-year institutions use some sort of performance-based metric as an entrance to, or a requirement to gain entrance into their institution. We know we have standardized tests, we use things like grade point average, and by virtue of a student being accepted into a four-year institution, they receive the message that they are, they have demonstrated sufficient aptitude. They have demonstrated that they belong there, that they are welcome there. Now that's a different sort of dynamic with a two-year institution or community college, where we are an open access sort of institution. Regardless of prior academic performance, a student that earns a high school diploma or the equivalent will be accepted into the institution. So my question is, how does a student then receive that message that they belong here, that they're good enough, that they're college material? Oftentimes, students that have not done well academically in high school feel like the only option that they have is to go to a community college. And even there, imagine if they receive the message how hard or how difficult the particular course is that they're taking, at what point do they receive that validating message that they're smart enough, that they're good enough, that they belong here? So because we are uniquely designed that way, in that we don't have these performance-based metrics that would prohibit a student from getting into the institution, we have to find ways to communicate to students that they belong. And faculty are uniquely positioned, I believe, to do that within the classroom, in terms of helping students to understand that everybody in the classroom has the potential to succeed. And that message, I think, because it is not done based upon that entrance, in terms of not having these performance-based metrics, it's incumbent upon the faculty member and administrators and staff to somehow communicate to students that they belong. Okay, so I'm going to run along here. Lundberg and Schreiner found that although faculty-student interaction contributed to success of students of all races, it has been found to be a better predictor of learning, particularly for students of color. So students of color, and that's the thing about faculty-student interaction, it is not something that is just an intervention or something that could be done with your Black students. It's actually good for all students. But in terms of the benefits that students receive as a result of it, Lundberg and Schreiner is saying that as a predictor of learning, it's been better for students of color. Bauer found that Black male students reported higher levels of validation from faculty, also reported higher levels of faculty-student engagement. When you have faculty that are validating, you see higher levels of faculty-student interaction and faculty-student engagement. Macari and Pilar found that students in a particular chemistry class that viewed their relationship with faculty members as positive perform better on the final grade. So when students view faculty as validating and they have a more positive perspective of faculty, the final grade tend to be higher. So I'm gonna give you some strategies that you can use inside the classroom to sort of increase or enhance your interaction with Black males. It looks like we have a question. I might have to. Sharice asked, would you suggest cohort learning environments? Absolutely. Tinto did a study with community college students, and he talked a little bit about this idea of cohorts, or really they're called learning communities. And in these learning communities, they're really cohorts where students are in the same class between two classes or more classes. And oftentimes the assignments are sort of collaborated together. The faculty members collaborate to create the assignments. And cohort learning environments, absolutely. Because what students do in a cohort is students have the opportunity to not only identify with their peers, but they get to share their sort of experiences with their peers. And that creates confidence for students, as opposed to being an isolated individual in the classroom where they may or may not know anyone else. Students may be less inclined to participate. So Wood and Turner identified 5 strategies that simple strategies that faculty can use in the classroom to enhance their interaction. Being friendly with students from the onset, from the second students come into the classroom, being met with a smile and how are you and how you're doing. Some classrooms can be very cold where students walk into the classroom and the faculty may give a general greeting or may just go right into the lesson. So being friendly sort of communicates to students that this is a place where my opinion may be welcomed, and where I may not have the pressure of wondering whether or not the faculty views me negatively. Checking in with students on academic progress. Maybe ask the student not only about how things are going in your particular class, but how are classes going in general. Students that have the opportunity to discuss these things with faculty members builds the relationship, helps to cultivate the relationship. Listening to student concerns, proactive in addressing performance issues. So sometimes students will learn that they're not doing well at times where it may be too late for them to do something about it. If you see that a student is not doing well in your class, it may be important to address that sooner rather than later. And then regularly encourage students to succeed. Regularly encourage students to put in the effort and to work hard in the classroom, and that it pays off. You could try the button now. It doesn't work. So I referenced CESI earlier in a report called Aspirations to Achievement for Men of Color in Community Colleges. One of the key findings was that faculty interaction makes all the difference. Personal connection, high expectations, and then faculty that show interest in the subject matter as well. But faculty really are the difference maker for students of color oftentimes. And this report, you can look it up, goes into detail about sort of how faculty can sort of increase that interaction with students. Strategies outside of the classroom, you can always invite students to assist with research projects. Students that get the opportunity to interact with faculty on research projects and things of that nature help to cultivate the relationship. Spend time with students socially outside of class. This may be an area where some don't feel that comfortable, but eating lunch in the cafeteria where the students eat lunch and just letting the students see you outside of the classroom is an opportunity to set them at ease and make them feel more comfortable in your classroom. Serving as advisors with student clubs, and then faculty mentoring. All right, so Rosalia says that I provide progress reports at weeks 5, 10, and 15. It has worked well for my students. Progress reports are always a good thing, and it's something that we use at all of our institutions. But I would take it a step further and ask if a student is disengaged on a particular day, how comfortable are we with having a discussion with that student after class? Because sometimes, I don't know about your institutions, but our progress reports, they don't really, or our student monitoring, let me not say progress reports, but our student monitoring don't really yield the kind of results that we want, and that is to get students to come in and talk about the difficulties they may be having in the classroom. A progress report, and I'm thinking in the terms that you may be using it, may be more effective because it's, I guess, provided to the student individually. She says, all right, so Rosalia says, I teach online. If my students do not respond to an email, I will pick up the phone and call. See, Rosalia, not many people are that comfortable doing that. It may be seen by some faculty as outside of their scope. And what I want and what I hope for is that more faculty will feel more comfortable, sort of taking the time to talk to a student that may be having difficulty in the classroom, or if they see that a student is not engaged as much as they would like. I would hope that faculty would feel more comfortable sort of approaching that student. Like I said, maybe not inside the classroom, but outside of the classroom, before or after class is over, maybe a better way of doing that. I don't know how much time we have left here. Oh, it looks like we have a, do I just click on it?
I don't really know.
Don't stop it.
Oh, there it goes. All right, we have another statement by Sharice. It says, what I have done is created a Twitter account specifically for students where I post things that are educational. Now, that's another one where some faculty feel comfortable doing that. Some faculty do not feel comfortable doing that. But certainly that's another way to interact with students that's not pressured and not sort of on the spot for students, but they can sort of demonstrate their interest in the classroom. All right, and Sharice further states that she posts things that are on their educational and on their level. And that's the thing. We have classrooms where you have some students that are on one level and students that are on another level. And certainly these are things like a Twitter account is an opportunity for you to sort of address, those educational things that may help a student in terms of where they are and the level that they're at.
Okay, Teresa, you want
All right, so we're going to wrap up this session. I thank all of you for participating and asking questions. Hopefully something was said or shown that will be of thank you all for participating.
Thank you again, Professor Wilson. Thank you everyone for taking time out of your day today to attend this webinar. I hope you enjoyed the webinar sponsored by the council. We look forward to doing this again in the fall, and be on the lookout for more events. And once again, thank you to everyone. Have a great day.